Within every legend, there comes an origin, and even from the beginning, Kyler DeAugustinos was filled with greatness.
When I remember Kyler playing basketball, they had Bitty League at Alexander, so Kyler played in it when he was in the second grade. He made the All-Star team as a second grader on the fourth grade All-Star team, and kind of just took it from there.
And even at a young age, he started to turn some heads, including that which would be his head coach.
I had heard a lot about Kyler, and I snuck in. I was no longer coaching at the high school level. I wasn't coaching at all. And I snuck in the corner of Athens Middle School Gymnasium and watched him play in the 7th and 8th grade, just to see him play. And I just kind of stood back in the corner and in the shadows when nobody could see me, and just watched. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, he's pretty good. He's as good as everybody says he is. And I thought he is going to be a lot of fun for Coach Kearns to coach at Alexander High School.
But it was known to stay at the top, you have to continue to work hard.
In the summer, I try to go to the gym every day, probably 2 to 5 hours a day, probably. Just grind every day, play as much as possible.
And even with all that work, there was still one more weapon for DeAugustino to add to his arsenal.
So freshman year in conditioning is when I learned about the Vertimax. So I used that a lot. I was catching some lobs on some like 9-foot, 9.5-foot rims freshman year. And I just kept using the Vertimax. Not really telling anybody about it, but like knowing about it. And then junior year is when it really like took off. And I was flying. Yeah, it was like a surprise thing, and no one really knew about it besides a couple teammates, coaches, and then when it happened, everyone just went crazy.
And when you play at such a high level for so long, there's a legacy that gets left behind.
Kyler's been the face of our program, and I was more than happy to defer to him as being the face of our program. He was an excellent example to all the young kids. He has got young kids trailing around behind him before and after every game. He's got young kids helping him get stretched out in the hallways. They all want a little piece of Kyler. I've seen him before games out on the floor playing one-on-one with our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders and our junior high kids. He is the kid that everybody showed up at the high school games to watch, and we had big crowds on the road from opposing teams because they wanted to see Kyler play.
Honestly, I just wanted to get better as a player, a teammate, and just make the team the best that we could be. Honestly, that was my goal.